What is it about this place that is so extraordinary?
Well, Eastern State Penitentiary changed everything. It changed the way that people, not just in the United States, but all over the world, thought of what prisons are for. This building was built after centuries of building prisons that were designed to punish and designed to scare. And this was a group of people here in Philadelphia, a bunch of mostly Quakers, leave it to the Quakers. Everything in Philadelphia goes back to Benjamin Franklin and the Quakers, right?
Right.
So this is a group of mostly Quakers that met for the first time in the home of Benjamin Franklin, who said, there must be another option aside from scaring and aside from punishing. Why don't we build a prison that can make people better, can make people look into their hearts and have actual remorse for what they did, make them penitent. Let's make a new building, we'll call it a penitentiary, a building designed to make people regret their behavior, make them remorseful, make them penitent.
With an eye toward coming back into society?
With an eye towards coming back into society, exactly.
Yeah.
Because what they were finding was that people who went to those other prisons, the prisons designed for punishment and for deterrence, usually left behaving worse than they behaved when they came in. So if your goal is a more peaceful, law-abiding society, those old prisons, you could argue, were setting them back. They were creating people who had very few options left when they left those prisons. People would go through years and years of what today we would call torture, and then be released right out onto the street, and they made really bad neighbors. And so this group said, let's build this whole system around the outcome we want, which is people who are, and they didn't specifically say Christian, but they wanted people who were spiritually in touch. In fact, they supported Jewish worship here, even in the early years. So, but it was definitely religious, spiritual. They wanted people to spend time in reflection, and they were influenced by the Quaker belief in silence. You think of Quaker meetings being quiet. Quakers believe that people are inherently good. They believe that you and I and everyone on your crew and everyone around us.
I don't know about them.
I don't know about them either. They're kind of giving me the eyeball. But they believe that even the person who did the worst thing you can think of, in their heart knew right from wrong, and there must be a reason that they're making a bad choice, but the person in their heart is good.
So we were born good, made bad choices, but we can get back to good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they believed, here's the strategy. We'll pull people out of this corrupt society, away from their family, which is not doing a good job raising them, or away from their friends who are a bad influence, and put them in silence and leave them there for 6 months, a year, 2 years. Typical sentence here is about 2 years. So by today's standards, it's a short prison sentence, although I have to keep in mind it was a much shorter lifespan people had back then too. But typically 6 years was a very long sentence here at Eastern State. But a typical sentence was 2 years of solitary confinement. And it was a really strict solitary confinement.
I was just going to use that term, and that's a term probably most people have heard about, even if they've never heard of this place. They've heard the term solitary confinement. And I think usually when we think of that term, we think of that as such a horrible thing, that people could be, left to be by themselves, locked in a solitary cell for some period of time. But you're saying here, that was actually seen as a step forward, a progressive way of thinking about a sentence for a crime committed.
It's one of the great lessons of Eastern State, maybe the great lesson, is that the solitary confinement, which they believed was going to make people penitent, they believed it would benefit the person going through the experience. What they found was that it was incredibly painful and upsetting of an experience, psychologically destructive to put someone in solitary confinement for long periods of time. And here and in every other prison in the world, probably, they began to use solitary confinement as a punishment, which every second grader knows. Solitary confinement is what you do. For that matter, it's what we also do with our kids, our actual second graders, right? But everyone knows that solitary confinement is the punishment. That was not, when they built this building, they thought solitary confinement was the cure. And they knew that it was going to be a harsh cure. They knew that this was going to be some painful medicine. And so there was a deterrent effect. People wrote and said, you cannot do this to me. Please, I'll do anything. Don't put me in solitary confinement. They knew it would be harsh. But the people who ran it thought, we're doing this for your benefit. This is going to hurt us more than it hurts you, all that stuff. And we want you to spend time thinking about your crimes, and want you to meet with a spiritual advisor. If they were inclined, they could read a copy of the Bible, which was provided for them, and spend your time in silence, learn good work habits. They would teach them a trade, and they believed that this time in solitary confinement would, over time, almost remove crime from the world. They thought that they had found the solution to make a better world, a world essentially without crime.